Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, aka Blender Ed, Blender HD, if you want to follow me there on Twitter. The co-author of the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass at theoryofdfs.com. And I'm joined, as usual, with Erik Beimfohr from spikeweek.com to discuss yesterday's NFL slate. Erik, I know you only play limited lineups. How much CPAT did you have?
Zero CPAT, zero Tyreek, which makes for $0 coming back to me in tournaments. It was definitely one of those days where like you're close. Like I kind of tweeted about it this morning, where like you were like close but still so far away type of thing. Like had some of the right pieces and then just way too many of the wrong pieces, and not the, like I said, didn't have Tyreek and didn't have CPAT. And so it's like, I mean, what are you going to do, especially on FanDuel? I don't know if you played tournaments on FanDuel.
Why was Patterson like 15% owned on FanDuel?
He was in the, like, whatever it is, their like game changer, that whatever their version of like the game changer was. He was like 21% and Tyreek was like over 20. And so I like opened it up because my team actually wasn't that bad over there. And I go and open that up, and like after Tyreek scores the third touchdown and CPAT scores his third touchdown, I'm like, okay, well, definitely not live for anything now. So
I get the Hill ownership. I mean, it's Tyreek Hill. Okay, on FanDuel especially, like I get it completely. I got saved, Erik. I got saved in FanDuel Cash in the last 5 minutes of the slate because
Devontae, Robert Woods, who was it in the last 5 minutes? I don't remember.
In FanDuel Cash, I did not play DJ Moore. I did not play Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill was 40% owned in cash.
I know.
Okay, I didn't have him.
FanDuel.
Right, I didn't have him. Yep. DJ Moore was like 28% owned. I didn't have him. I had Kelsey, who only had 4 points. I had Chuba Hubbard and Mike Davis in my running back slots.
Same.
Right. This is cash games, obviously.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of late game stuff. Like my wide receiver slots were Adams, Samuel, and Woods.
Mm-hmm.
And I had Aaron Jones in my flex.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like I was going into those 4 o'clock games, going into the halftime of the 4 o'clock games, I was dusted. I was like, I'm winning like 8% of my head-to-heads. And then the last 5 minutes, I mean, Robert Woods scores that touchdown, and then Debo scores his second touchdown, and that got me. Then that boop, and I'm like,
yep.
Hey, profitable day, because I crushed in DK cash. So like that was I won like 93% of my head-to-heads in DK. But it saved my whole. I mean, essentially saved my whole day. I came in 11th in the SPY on DraftKings, but that was only for $1,000. These payout structures are nuts. So like in GPPs, I was down like I think 8% on the day. I mean, I put like $1,800 in GPP lineups and got like $1,500 back, or even more than that. Yeah, almost broke even, and then. My early only FanDuel bombed, and that was like the loss. So it ended up I made $1,800, but it was on like 15,500 in entries. So it's like it's a 12% return. But hey, it's profitable. Profit. It's raw money, whatever. But I just like that. On FanDuel, I'm looking at these double ups, and I'm like, and there's nothing I could do, right? Because it's like Hill already put up 50 points. And DJ Moore already put up like 26 points. Like, oh, I should late swap. It's like all my exposure is in those are the guys. Yeah. Like, who would I be swapping to? Those are who I am actually playing. So I just have to sit there and go, I hope Stafford doesn't forget about Woods again. Right? Right? I hope Trey Lance comes into this game because Jimmy G can't throw the ball. And magically happens. But some of those ownerships there, I mean, on the CPAT on FanDuel, I mean that was nuts. On DraftKings is much more uh, spread out.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, One thing that I noticed when I was building lineups, and I talked about it on the pregame show on Roto Grinders, is that going into the slate, like on Wednesday, Thursday, just preliminarily looking at it, I'm going, the Dallas Carolina game projects the best. Like, it just has the most well projected players together in one game for
Yep.
their prices.
Mm-hmm.
DJ Moore, Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, both quarterbacks, both running backs,
Yep.
like everyone, Dalton Schultz at tight end. I mean, like they all project well, but I didn't get the sense that this game would be like the super owned one. And
Mm-hmm.
then none of the running backs were going to be super owned. I think David Montgomery was 22% owned. Henry was around there. But yet
Mm-hmm.
you had like we had like 15 running backs between like 4,800 and 6,500 that projected within like 2 or 3 points of each other at all spread out ownership. Like I have in here, I have my lineup HQ up based on my projected ownership, which is kind of an aggregate plus my own input. Like I had like David Montgomery at 20%, Hubbard at 14, Gibson at 11, Sermon at 7, Harris at 16, CH at 11, Swift at 14, Zeke at 8, Gaskin at 5, Kamara 13, Henry 22, Mike Davis 9, Chase Edmonds 7, Darrell Henderson 7. I mean, like I'm already down. I mean, Dalvin Cook, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon. I mean, like to me, there was so many running backs to choose from that when I was building lineups, and you know me, I use an optimizer to do my research. Like my natural inclination is okay. I'm going to be under on this Carolina Cowboys game because it'll be the most owned combination of players.
Yep.
But I saw that like, well, if I want to, okay, if I don't play Derrick Henry, if I don't play David Montgomery, and I don't play the Lions defense, like what does this lineup look like even with that stack? And it looked fine. I mean, like I'm not sacrificing that much. I'm now this lineup has Najee Harris and Trey Sermon and has
Mm-hmm.
another wide receiver one off, and it has a defense that projects, you know, within 1 point of the Lions at like 12 to 15% less percentage points owned. And I just couldn't get away from like, no, I guess I'm gonna have a lot of this. Why not? Why
Yep.
not have a lot of this game when I can make so many lineups that just have different running backs in it? Did you find it the same way? I mean, how many lineups did you play on DraftKings, and
Three.
what like games were you targeting? Because me, my top exposures, I had 3 games as my top exposures, and that was Carolina, Dallas. It was Washington, Atlanta, and it was Buffalo. And Buffalo, I didn't even care. Like I was throwing in Jordan Akins in the tight end spot as my quote run back because like either you were playing Kelsey or you were punting, and most people were punting
Mm-hmm.
with like Ingram or Disley. So I'm
Disley.
like, what am I really giving up by not just playing Jordan Akins here if I'm playing Josh Allen with Diggs
Yep.
or whatever? Some lineups in the slant I had with Knox, and obviously that was the better pairing
Yeah.
to do him with. But to me, like, yes, and I of course I always have Mahomes. I have some type of
Mm-hmm.
Mahomes lineups. Uh so those are 3 games that I mean, like that Heineke projected so well for that game environment. It just so happened that 6 running backs score touchdowns, and 2 of them are
Yep.
backup running backs. So like Ridley doesn't get there, Pitts doesn't get there, McLaurin does.
Mm-hmm.
Curtis Samuel 5.9 ain't gonna do anything even at 3K. Uh, Gibson, I mean, he gets 15 points. Mike Davis got a pity touchdown at the end, right? I mean, well, he did well to get in the end zone. I mean, but I mean,
Yeah.
he would have gotten 4 points without that. Uh, so that was what I was attacking. Were you more off the board than I was? Because I don't think Washington Atlanta was that far off the board, but I still think it was under owned.
I think my biggest struggle of this week was kind of what you outlined with like there wasn't the Dallas Carolina game was like the most owned game, exactly kind of like you said, but it it wasn't like what the Cowboys Chargers from a couple weeks ago, or there's usually like a game where it's like, okay, like I can't do it with this game. There's no way, it's over. The ownership isn't efficient, blah blah blah, and then like there's this waterfall effect to ownership where you have this one game that's super owned here, right? And then there's maybe a little drop off to the next, not necessarily the next game, but the next best plays, and then after that it's like on everybody's like super low owned. And this week it was like peanut butter spread. Yes, a couple of those guys were a little bit, but you just outlined the running back stuff, right? And there's 15 running backs and they're all within not that many percentage points different. And that was in most fields. Most fields, even the smaller fields, were close enough to that. So this was the biggest struggle of a week that I had by far of the year so far, is figuring out that angle.
I'm assuming because when the ownership, it's weird to say. A lot of GPP players will say it. They prefer slates where the ownership condenses, because then there are obvious leverage spots. When the ownership is much more spread out, like where's you're not. If there is leverage, you're not getting enough relative value to make up for the projections. Because like, oh, I'm not going to play Derrick Henry, so I'm going to play what? The cheap wide receiver that everyone's playing on the Titans anyway. I mean, like, or there's 5 Josh Reynolds. You have to just bet the one that's going to, Jeremy McNichols. That's the one. I mean, like, how are you ever going to predict that? And in the Carolina Dallas game, there's no leverage there because everyone has some amount of ownership. Mm-hmm. And everywhere else is like, well, where do you get the closest thing probably to leverage was to play Mooney instead of Montgomery or something like that. But even then, like, there's just, do you play Alan Lazard instead of Devontae Adams? Obviously play Randall Cobb. There was just no obvious ways to, like, if you're building not from like, let me take a look at lineups, look at their projection, and look at the ownership type of, and like the players don't mean anything type of thing. Like there's no leverage, clear leverage opportunities that you would have much rather, Eric, if the Carolina game, like I'm looking here at the SPY. This is the 100K SPY. This is a single entry contest. DJ Moore was still only 15% owned.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like, so like, if you're like, oh, I can't play DJ Moore and I can't play Amari Cooper, like, dude, they're not, these guys aren't, it wasn't like Cooper Kupp last week.
Right.
Right. We don't have a 33% owned guy. Derrick Henry was 30% owned in the SPY. Right. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, but that's a price play. It's like, can I get 28 points from someone that's 3,000 cheaper? Well, you could have. Right. So you didn't even need Derrick Henry, nor did you need leverage on Derrick Henry. So you found it hard primarily because you're sitting there going, do I play DJ Moore, or do I play Deebo Samuel, or do I play Terry McLaurin, or do I play Calvin Ridley, or do I play I want to go up even further, someone else in that range, CeeDee Lamb,
Metcalf, Justin Jefferson,
right? And you look across and like, oh, all of these guys we just mentioned are between 8 and 15% owned.
Yes.
Like all of them are, and they're all in different games, and like, so I'm going to leverage off a 15% DJ Moore to play a 9% owned Terry McLaurin. Like what are you gaining that much? And it's not like they project that differently from each other. You're losing 2 points in projection for like 7 points in ownership, and it's like, is that even like, that may even be efficient, right? So it wouldn't matter which way you do. So is that the reason why, especially in single entry 3-max? Because even then the ownership didn't like, I would expect DJ Moore in the SPY to be like 26% owned. Mm-hmm. Right? Because at 6,600 he was the best point per dollar projected wide receiver. And he wasn't. So either people were pivoting off of that, or I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I get why Henry was owned, but like Robert Woods in the SPY was 17% owned. I was playing him thinking that like he's the play outside of Kupp. And it turns out that no, at 70% owned Woods, I probably would have much rather played Darrell Henderson in that spot.
Yep. I think what you outlined was I could normally, we'll come into this recording this podcast, and it was like, okay, I figured out at a certain point, like what my angle was to this slate, what the leverage point was. And it's not always just like, okay, Derrick Henry's 50%, I got to play Nick Westbrook or whatever. I know that that's not a good example, but you know what I mean? It's not like, oh, Devontae Adams is chalk, so I have to play Aaron Jones. It's not always as simple as direct, negatively correlated players, but there's like an angle, right? Everybody's jamming Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara, so I can play Najee Harris and Joe Mixon or whatever. Like there's just usually some sort of angle, or everybody's playing this Cowboys game, and the next highest scoring game is like a fifth of the ownership of that game or whatever. There's always something. And for the life of me, I could not, like, I honestly, it was exactly what you said. There were so many plays, and they were all at every position, basically, outside of Travis Kelce and Derrick Henry, and I guess Tyreek Hill. At every position, they were close enough projected, like points projection, right? Within a couple of points, typically, like 10 guys plus. And then they were close enough ownership projection wise that it's like, no matter what you did, right? I listened to some people and like the like Justin Jefferson, Odell Beckham thing, or like that game was like the sneaky GPP thing. And the next thing, Odell was like the highest, like right. One of the highest owned wide receivers on the slate, which in turn, like, oh, Justin Jefferson is like, oh, that's like my leverage play. But then he gets boosted up because not like a lot, right? But there's enough smart tournament players going, well, I'm playing Odell, so I'm going to have Justin Jefferson. And it was just all of this, right? And so like, I think what you said, having gone back and looked a little bit, like I wish I probably just would have jammed the Panthers and Cowboys game. It's easier to say now, but I definitely struggled with everything that you just said, because I could not figure out kind of this exact angle. The one thing, it's funny that you brought it up. So I kind of pivoted to two angles. I did stack the Chiefs game. Of course, I did not play Tyreek. I played Kelce. I played Hurts, but played Kelce as my bring back, which obviously that didn't go well.
Who'd you play as the wide receiver? I got burned on Jalen Reagor a lot.
Reagor, yep.
Okay, because he was Reagor. 1,000 cheaper than Smith, and Rager's a big play guy anyway.
He made everything work so perfect. That savings off of Smith made my lineup come together so perfect, and I was like, oh, like it happened. I'm struggling a little bit. Maybe we'll get into this on Sunday mornings. I only got like 20 minutes after the morning show on Roto Grinders, and I've had my teams pretty much done this week. Like I said, I was struggling so much. I didn't have my teams done, and then it was like boom, like 10 minutes before lock, I found the Hurts stack because I really wanted to play a Hurts stack and a stack of that game. But anyway, I went to two different things. Like I said, it was funny that you brought this up because like my flag plant, if you will, was Darnell Mooney. I was really, really high on him. So I played Fields to Darnell. I went back to the Fields thing to Darnell Mooney with DeAndre Swift.
Stop trying to make Justin Fields happen.
Stop
trying to make him happen, dude. He's not happening.
12 yards per attempt, almost 300 yards on 17 passes. But of course, David Montgomery scores 2 touchdowns, and Damian Williams scores a touchdown.
If I told you, Eric, if I told you we'd only throw the ball 17 times, do you play him?
No, of course not. But I told you,
hold on, I need to give you the argument. You need to get back to me. If you told me that Dak Prescott would only throw the ball 22 times, would I play him? Right? Okay. Right. So like I'm gonna use the same argument back at myself. Right? Same thing.
True.
Russell Wilson does it all the time. Right? He throws for 21 times. He throws for 315 yards and 5 touchdowns. It's like, how does that work?
Right, and I'm not comparing Fields to Dak and Russ and those type guys, but like Mahomes threw it 30 times yesterday. He threw 5 touchdowns. It's like he was playing the Lions. Their offense was outrageously efficient. Montgomery ran for 100 yards. Damian Williams ran the ball well. Fields threw 17 passes and almost had the 300-yard bonus. Like it was just absolutely insane. And I actually don't really have any regrets about the Fields Mooney thing. I mean, Mooney. I'm actually more disappointed because Mooney was, like I said, like a flag plant of mine, and he absolutely crushed. And it could not have mattered less based on how I made my teams. But I went to that, and what also that allowed me to do is like a skinny Justin Fields stack with this cheap receiver allowed me to kind of stack something else. And then, of course, I wanted Travis Kelce instead of Tyreek Hill, but it allowed me to get, whoever the hell I wanted, basically. The ownership was low enough, and The pricing was so cheap that I could really do whatever I wanted with that. And then so I went to that well, which I actually feel fine about. And then the other one was I kind of wanted to pull my optionality lever, if you will, my late swap lever, and I played a team. It ended up really bad, but it ended up on like it was basically a Rams Cardinals stack with Metcalf and Ayuk as a secondary correlation, but all I had was Gibson and Washington defense from the early slate. That was also I was pretty high on the Gibson Washington defense thing, which I think it's about time to give up on the Washington defense, and maybe Gibson too. But I wanted to, like, I didn't have a strong feel, right? We just talked about this. I think like all these games are the same, and the Rams Cardinals game and even the Seahawks 49ers game. What's really the difference between them and all those early games? And so I was like, I just want to, when I don't have a super, super strong preference, I want to use this optionality, lever to my advantage, and just kind of like, okay, let's gather as much information. Right. I got a one bet on Gibson and the Washington defense. And then let's see what, kind of how the slate plays out. And I was playing around with swaps and stuff because all my teams were shit, except that one, obviously, heading into the afternoon. And then, and I'm actually like, I'm talking to my buddy who is over here watching football with me. And I'm like, at this point, McLaurin had not caught his second touchdown. CPAT hadn't scored his third touchdown, and Tyreek hadn't scored another touchdown yet. Right? These all happened in like the waning minutes of the early games. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, look, Gibson's not great, but also Gibson, was still on the field, had potential to get more points, whatever. I'm like, this thing could work out. And then it was just like, dagger. Tyreek goes 50. McLaurin catches another one.
DJ Moore has a second touchdown, right?
Yep, DJ Moore scores another one, and I'm just like, I went from like, well, this thing could be live to completely and utterly buried. And so obviously that didn't, and the Rams were a disaster, and obviously I had Ayuk over Debo, so that didn't matter. But
you got optionality with that lineup. You got the option to not watch the 4:00 games at all because it doesn't matter.
Exactly. That's the underrated thing people don't understand about this option. When we talk about
optionality, close the laptop early. Okay, get on with my day.
Fade the early games. Watch all these guys go for 50 fantasy points, and then go for a walk or whatever. That's pretty much what my afternoon became. But like it was a very, very difficult slate, and I feel like there was so many ways that you could have said, like, this is the way I thought I should have gone. Like you talked about, we could argue we should have just went all in on the Panthers game, given the ownership that we saw. But it was so spread out. And I really, that's 100% what you said, have the most difficult times with those slates. And I definitely don't think that I, nailed it, but I also don't feel bad about some of the decisions that I made either. And sometimes that's just how it goes. It was kind of a funky slate, both like process, pre-slate, I thought it was awkward. And then the results were like, there wasn't like any game. I guess the KC game was a game that you needed, but it was kind of like, one-offs here and there. I mean, what won the game changer, the guy had like naked Kirk Cousins and like a bunch of one-offs. And so like tournament winning teams are that, I don't feel too bad, but yeah, it was an uncomfortable slate for me for sure.
But I mean, it highlights the fact that, and casual players don't understand it, that when the pricing and the ownership is more efficient, the skill gap goes down between sharp players and bad players, I guess, because it's so easy to make very similarly projected and owned lineups. So it's hard to screw up. I'm talking about mostly for GPPs. For cash games, it's a little bit differently. But that's the reason why, like, if you're sitting there going, I could play one of like 100 lineups and they all look the same to me, that means it's much easier for, if you're not good at this, as long as you play a high projected lineup within a certain ownership range, it's like you're probably just as good as it. You're probably not going to make, there's not as many mistakes you can make as long as you spend $50,000 in salary or about that, and you have play a quarterback and a wide receiver together pretty much, it's hard to go wrong.
Yep.
Like projection wise. Now, FanDuel typically has much softer pricing, and you could make major mistakes on FanDuel. But when you hear sharper players go, I found it was a difficult slate, that doesn't mean that's people. People, I think, misappropriate this because you've heard this before, Eric, where especially like in basketball, like you have a basketball slate that like none of the value plays show up, right? Because we're so used to it. Like every slate, there's going to be
Yep.
some $4,200 guy, someone that's underpriced, and then you get nothing. Like and even the guys that are in good matchups are overpriced, and you're like, well, this is a tough slate. And the thing is, like sharp players, I mean, we'll play every slate, so it doesn't even
Right.
matter. But casuals tend to think the opposite and go, this slate is too tough. I'm going to sit it out. It's like, no, those are the slates that you should be playing because your lineups are more likely to be closer to sharp players' lineups because
Yep.
there's no huge mistakes that you could really make there. Everyone is kind of projected, owned, and priced efficiently enough that you not playing the $4,200 guy or whatever, this type of construction is not going to burn you that much. But you find, I mean, this is the peril in talking to people. Like I'm on the VOP committee for DraftKings.
Hmm.
Like I mean, it's noticeable that in all sports, DraftKings has tighter pricing than FanDuel.
Yep.
They do it for that reason. They do it because mathematically they know that the more efficient the pricing is, the easier it is for casual players to play. That the skill gap, they don't go broke as quickly. On FanDuel, I mean, dude, I was playing cash on FanDuel. I mean, yes, some of these lineups beat me, but I'm like, I don't know how they like. Good luck.
Yep.
Good luck. I hope you play me again. I mean, in a $50 head to head with these lineups in it, where when I see someone like, how is this guy beating me by this much this early? And I'm like, Khalif Raymond in cash. I mean, like what? How does that happen? Like,
Yep.
it's like, how do you have Tyreek Hill and Khalif Raymond together? Like, how did that work out? The one I get, the other one I don't, and then
Hmm.
then has Jimmy turns over the cards and it's Jimmy G in cash, and I'm like, what is going on FanDuel? But the problem is because we've talked about it in the VOP committee, and of course I'm under NDA, so I can't tell you what like DraftKings has like exactly said. But of course I could say what I've said. But essentially, it comes down to uh, casual players find it easier to play when it's priced softer, even though that's technically not beneficial for them because they're more likely to make big mistakes. So
Yep.
DraftKings knows no. DraftKings, I don't know what FanDuel knows. I don't know if FanDuel some can't even put the names in their contests. You get bracket to first, and like so, who knows what's going on there? But let me tell you that like DraftKings is aware that the more efficient pricing helps the ecosystem more than softer pricing. But they're also aware from a business perspective that there is softer action on FanDuel. And it's
Yeah.
from customer feedback. It's primarily because it's very much because of that reason. Now, there's also reasons like I like the interface better. Like it's colorful. I mean, but I'm talking about just from a gameplay perspective. Like there are people that I've talked to, casual people that like I prefer playing on FanDuel. DraftKings is too hard to make a lineup, right?
Yep.
And they go, no, but that's good for you. Let's just spend your 50,000 in salary, and you're going to have a much more competitive lineup on FanDuel.
Yep.
On FanDuel, like last week, like if you didn't play Barkley and Madison in cash games, it's like you know how big of a mistake you were making. But I won that week. But if you continue to make those big mistakes, like you're going to get crushed. On DraftKings, you're less likely to find those. Like I played David Montgomery in cash on DraftKings. I thought he was by far
Hmm.
the best point per dollar running back play on the slate for his volume in a
Yep.
favored matchup against. I mean, he projected the best in an aggregate, in the blitz, and everything.
Yep.
If you played a lineup without David Montgomery on DraftKings, that was still fun in cash games. He was the best, but he still wasn't the best. Like if you played a
Yep.
non-Derrick Henry cash lineup on DraftKings, I'm fine with that also. I mean, like
Hmm.
you didn't want to play Westbrook Akine in your wide receiver spot. I get it. If you put together all those types of lineups, they're all within like 2 points of each other. But on FanDuel, on the other hand, we get situations where you don't play the obviously underpriced guys like that. Your projection's off by 7, 8 points, and you're
Right.
like, dude, you're making dramatic mistakes. But with a lot of the DFS ecosystem, what we said about late swap, Casual players want late swap, so when the guy's injured, they can replace the other guy. Do you use late swap any other time? No. It's like, you know how much edge you're giving up, especially in basketball, by not utilizing late swap like every fucking hour practically, in order to re-optimize your lineups. Like that, they only, it's the first level type of thinking. What cards do I have? And that's all they're seeing is, what does it affect me? Oh, I can build a lineup. I don't have to punt on FanDuel, right? I don't have to play a cheap tight end. I don't have to play a $4,500 wide receiver on FanDuel. I can play 2 running backs that I've heard of, right? Then you go to DraftKings and it's like, okay, I want Derrick Henry, I want Devontae Adams, I want a Patrick Mahomes, and I want Tyreek Hill. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. You can't even build that lineup, and it's like you have to play creative players at that point in order to fit those in. So casual players go and they go, it's too hard. It's like, no, it's actually more beneficial to you. Now, obviously on this podcast, probably not speaking to people that are like that, but if you be more inclined, would you believe this is true? Be more inclined if you had a choice between slates, like the volume and when you play, be more inclined to play on days where the pricing is very inefficient, and be less inclined as a skillful player, right? Because Eric, you know how many times I've heard it in the Discord, in RG, especially NBA, we get one of those days where like half the league is out, right? Maybe not all of, like, because then it becomes even harder because there's like so many value plays. Yeah. But it's one of those slates where 1 o'clock news, 3 o'clock news, 5 o'clock news, and it's like, dude, like it's gonna be collusion time, right? It's collusion chat time type of thing, where there's like 4 guys on the slate where it's gonna be like they're all gonna be like 80+% owned. Those are the slates in GPPs, especially the large field ones, that you should be playing. That's when you should be upping your volume, because it's more likely that bad players will make mistakes. Doesn't mean you have to play all 4 of those guys, right? It could mean that you're playing 3 in the other, but they're going to be lineups that play none of those and are going to be projected for 28 points lower than any other lineup. And like, you're going to find enough of those lineups that it eats up the entire rake. So it's almost like you're playing for free that night.
Yep.
But on days where it's like, where there's no value, there's no nothing, like those are the days that you're, as a sharp player, you should actually go less in value. But a lot of sharp people go, oh, because the pricing is so tight, like, I'll know the difference between this matchup and that. It's like, well, no, it doesn't work that way. Your opponents aren't being punished as long as they spend all their salary by your minimal edge whatsoever. Great. Let's say you do have a minimal edge, so 1%. But on a slate where like the half of your lineup is virtually like a lock, like, dude, there's still going to be 20% of the lineups in the contest that don't have those guys in it. It's like, dude, the rake's 15%. If people are willing to play lineups that are 20 or 30 points projected lower to you, shouldn't you be putting in more lineups then?
Right. And we talk about all the time, or at least like that's my favorite phrase, right? Is finding like a path to first, finding a real clean path, like especially when you play like I do with only a handful of teams. When it's a slate like yesterday, you tell me what the path was. I still don't know what we have the results, and I'm like, the top 3 in the Millie Maker didn't even have Tyreek Hill, and he scored 50 points. Like, you tell me how you were, like, what we were supposed to do with that slate. I have, like I said, I have the results, and I don't know what the cleanest path to first was, because people won millions of dollars without the one fucking guy that scored 50 points. Like, I'd say, like, I don't even know what you.
CPAT had to be a path to first only because of the running back position. Because I mean, there are more wide receivers on this slate that put up over 30 points that you could have had 4 of them and not had Tyreek Hill. But at running back, there were too many running backs that only scored 10 or 15 or something like that. That if you had Cordell Patterson and some running back that scored over 20 points, that probably was the winning line. And the fact you didn't even need Tyreek Hill to win a large field contest shows to me how important it's the weirdest thing. I think the running back positions slots are the most important slots in all of DFS, but it's something that I say for soccer. It's more correlative to the defense, where the defensive slot in your roster is going to decide whether or not you win a GPP, and it's the decision you should spend the least amount of time on because it's so
That was
variant. But
yep.
one up from that, running back is like, dude, I'm choosing my game, building my lineup around a game. Then running back slots, whatever fits. Like it's like as long as that. I mean, I'm obviously playing higher project. I'm probably not playing Melvin Gordon on yesterday's slate. Like I'm just talking about we had 20 guys that were like viable that
Yeah.
you could have plugged in.
Easily.
Like
Yes.
I don't start from a perspective of like yesterday's slate. I did not start from a perspective of what running backs I'm playing. It came with what games am I playing, and then it's like I'm gonna cap all these running backs at 20%, and let's see what shows up, right? And just like
Yep.
and by
Spin the
default,
wheel.
running back wide receiver combinations. So I had a lot of Davis McLaurin combination, right?
Right.
But like, who else am I going to put there? If I'm not going to put Davis, I'm going to put Gaskin there. Like, and it still have McLaurin. Like, what's the difference? I might as well have the correlation. Gaskin, what happened to him? They just decided that he's not going to play anymore.
I played Gaskin and I was looking. I obviously gave up, paying close attention to like the box score or whatever. Gaskin, I went back and looked. So like I played Gaskin because part of my thing was I really liked I thought the Dolphins were kind of undervalued. I thought they would home favorite against the Colts with the Colts O-line injuries, blah blah blah. Right?
You know what happened to me? You know what happened to me? I had the worst of both worlds. When I saw Gallman was active, I had Mike Davis in like 18% of my lineups, and I'm like, Gallman's active, and the projection didn't change, but I'm like, there's a lot of downside, much more downside than I expected here. Let me get rid of some Davis. I'm like, well, who's around Davis that I could just, because also I was manually going through my lineup. So I'm like, I'll screw Gaskin's going to be what, 4% on?
Yep.
There you go. Give me Gaskin against the Colts. He can catch some passes out of the backfield. The problem is he's only in the field 23% of the time. What happened now? What happened?
He basically didn't play. He had, and I only remember this because somebody posted a tweet or like that they were like, "What the fuck happened with Miami? They're getting their asses kicked by the Colts, who are awful." Myles Gaskin had been playing at least 50% of the snaps all year, had been getting at least 6 targets, and I think it was 6 in every single game. And then they're losing, and he played 23% of the snaps, got 2 carries and 0 targets in the passing game. It was just like, you tell me how, again, same thing. Like, I'm not saying that, woe is me. Like, I don't really give a shit. It's not like clearly a couple extra targets wasn't going to get Myles Gaskin where you needed him to be. But it was like you said, Myles Gaskin was not that different from Mike Davis. Like, they were different. Mike Davis projected better. I get it.
Trey Sermon even.
Trey Sermon.
Right?
Like, there was all these guys. I played
CEH was 5,400. Yeah. I mean, like, it's just like pick. And it's not like one is dramatically more owned than the other. It's just like, I just need someone in that range, plug him in. Yep. If he's correlated with a receiver in my lineup,
him if I can.
Right? And then fine, okay. So obviously my Sermon, if Metcalf is in the lineup, most likely it's going to be Sermon and not Davis, right? I mean, like that, but the actual guy, it's like they all project it in the same range. It's just, so that's why I was just building lineups, going like stack, and running back, and just like whatever fits, and just it is what it is. And then some you hit on, and some you don't hit on, and it's just running back roulette. And whoever gets in the end zone gets in the end zone. Whoever doesn't, and so I think I'm truthfully I think the tight end position may mean more than the running back positions. Only because at tight end there either is
huge gap,
a huge right. Like you have to roster a tight end, and if an owned tight end puts up 20 more points than anyone else at the tight end position, like you gain all of that at that one because everyone has to have some 2-point tight end or something in their spot.
Yep.
Running back at least fits in 3 slots, right? Tight ends fits in 2, running back in 3, and there's just more good running. I mean, there's just so if a running back puts up 30 points. It's like, okay, I could find another running back to put up 30. I could find one that put up 24 at least. Tight end puts up 30 points. It's like, dude, there may not be any tight ends that put up more than 12. I mean, or there may be one. One's with 22, and it's it's Jeff Swaim, and he's 0.5. It's Jonnu Smith 2 touchdown game out of nowhere. Like it's someone that like, dude, he's not even owned. So it's like you would probably not land on him, and no one has him anyway.
I posted the top 5 because I was looking at some of the tight end stuff. Yesterday's top 5, so the week 4 top 5 tight end scores. I want to find it really, really quick because it illustrates this point perfectly. Top 5 fantasy tight ends in week 4. Number 1, CJ Uzoma. Number 2, Dawson Knox. Number 3, Mo Alley Cox. Number 4, Dalton Schultz. Number 5, Max Williams. So when Travis Kelce doesn't do Travis Kelce things, good fucking luck, right? It's like, but to your point, that's what, like, the importance of that position. That kind of actually, people thought that meant like, oh my God, tight end is a crapshoot, and it does, but it also illustrates, like, look, Travis Kelce was at the top of that, or Darren Waller was at the top of that list every week until this week, right? And Waller still might get there. He plays tonight. Obviously, wasn't on the DFS slate. But the thing about running backs, like the running back versus tight end thing, was so true. And I did want to double back on the running back thing. What I tried to do this week was, because, like you said, I know the running back defense decisions are so important, yet so impossible and like useless spending my time on. I was actually correlating those two things, and then like using all the other positions to basically like stack 2 games. And so, like I mentioned, I would do Gibson and the Washington defense, because it was like, okay, these running backs are all, I have no idea. I don't know. Gibson, yeah, Montgomery, whatever. I don't know. But if the defense does well, that should, in theory, right, give my running back a leg up on all those other running backs at that spot. Now, I did that poorly. I did not pick the right ones. But your point is the same thing. There's ways to kind of build in the correlation, right? Like a Sermon and Metcalf, like you said, or play Sermon in the 49ers defense, or
like Gaskin in the Dolphins defense.
Yep, right.
There's tons of. I didn't get many points out of that.
I think the Dolphins defense barely outscored Gaskin, and Gaskin had 0.3 points, I believe. So that tells you about how well that one went.
But I think it's more the point of the Jordan Akins example of,
yes,
if you're going to play a bill stack and you don't want to spend up on Cooks as a run back, you don't even need a run back in the Bills, because they were so favored by so much. Just double stack and don't worry about it. But it's like, what's the purpose of having Will Dissly in that lineup? Yes, when Jordan Akins is 2,900 and he's at least on the other side of the game. Like, what's the projection difference between Dissly and Akins? Not enough that you should matter. I mean, we're talking about punt tight ends here. So just play Akins in that line. And you know that Akins is going to be 10 times less owned than Dissly. Max Williams. I'm playing Kyler Murray, AJ Green, Max Williams lineups. Because it's like, that those tight end spots, unless it's going to be a high end tight end, like if you need the double stack, just doesn't matter. Well, this guy Tommy Tremble was in some of my Sam Darnold lineups, and it probably wouldn't have hurt you. You could have won a smaller GPP with any of these tight end with 2 points out of your tight end, as long as you got everything else right.
Yep.
So why not? I don't understand why less people do, because I see these ownerships of like I understand why Dalton Schultz was owned. Okay, he projected well. Okay, I get that. But and I know you always get Kelce because of Mahomes, but like you see high owned quarterbacks and you go, why didn't anyone have like Zach Ertz? Like why was, like, if you're playing Hurts, just play.
I was
Ertz.
mad at myself about that too, because I looked at it and then I went to Kelce, which also made sense, but I was like, do the Ertz or Goddard.
Well, in an Ertz lineup, you'd play Tyreek. Like you would play.
That's
Ertz,
what I mean.
Ertz, Tyreek,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and that, but that was the leverage. That was the leveraged way to attack that, and that was the. Like I said, we talked about it a little bit already, where I was like, I made some mistakes, I think, but I actually don't feel really bad about anything, given how I feel about that slate. That was one that I definitely feel like was kind of obvious, and I screwed that up on the Hurts team. It was kind of laziness, probably. I was like, okay, Hurts has all these wide receivers. Some of them are very cheap. They allowed me to do the things that I wanted. And I'm like, well, I can just play Kelce. Right? I can.
No, but I don't think that's a mistake.
Easy bring back. But like what was?
But it's not. But it's not. Kelce was not that owned.
Yeah, that's true.
And also Kelce was the only tight end, maybe Kittle. Like if Kelce puts up Tyreek's numbers.
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying, maybe not his exact. He's probably not going to get that many yards. But let's say Kelce had 120 yards on 8 for 120 with 2 touchdowns. Like, dude, he beats out so many tight ends by like ridiculous amounts
Yeah.
that you'd rather have it in your tight end spot than in a wide receiver. Look, the Millie Maker winner didn't even have
True.
Tyreek Hill, right? You didn't even need a wide receiver with 50 points because there was enough wide receivers with 30 plus points and enough running backs with 25 plus points that the tight end spot, like you needed Dawson Knox, right? Like that, you needed something like that. And that's more likely to happen at tight end. So no, I don't believe, to me, it's not a mistake. We said before, the ownership and the pricing was efficient enough that it's not like Kelsey was 27% owned. I mean, like you said yourself, there's no where's the leverage? Hill wasn't that owned. No one was that owned to that extent where you're looking to do the flippy flip on it. So it's like, oh yeah, everyone's playing Mahomes, Kelsey, and a Hurts, Smith, Kelsey lineup. So I'm going to play Hurts, Hill at so much lower ownership. Like, no, they're about the same ownership. I mean,
true.
The overall ownership between the three players are about the same, just at different positions. So truthfully, I don't think you should hit yourself at all. If Kelsey puts up 50 points like Hill did, we'd be talking about, like, obviously you play when everyone's playing punt tight end, you just play Kelsey and get all the right. So yeah. To me, that was actually the most obvious angle on a slate that had no angles.
Right. I played Kelsey twice. That was the end of my slate, basically. We could set aside everything else, but I played Kelsey on two, on two of the teams. And when you pay 8,100 for a tight end, he scores 4 points. And I played him in FanDuel Cash. I played him in my FanDuel tournament because it was just like, I didn't give a shit. I'm just playing this.
Run me down. I'm going to play the highest ceiling tight end, and if he gets there, good luck to you because you're going to have to run me down.
And he doesn't even have to get there. You know what I mean? That's maybe on DraftKings a little bit, but even then, like you said, look at I played Corey Davis for 5,000. I played Darnell Mooney for 3,900. You could play Amari Cooper for 6K. You could play. The list goes on and on and on of all those guys that you could play. And how many of those wide receivers scored 20 plus points? Like a million. Everybody, they're handing out 20-point games to wide receivers like candy, and 15 plus point games
except
to
for
running
OBJ.
backs.
Except for
Odell.
Baker made sure that didn't happen. What was up with that? I discussed it with James. James, I don't know. On the pregame show, there's a difference between me saying that I think he was overowned to him being way over projected, but I aggregate projections from across the industry. Now, obviously, I weight different ones differently. He projected okay, but I had Cooper 30 points higher projected than him. I had Robert Woods, who was 500 cheaper, a point higher projected than him. James, on the morning show, James is like, I had OBJ as the second highest raw points wide receiver. Okay, so you have the same, right? You have the same reaction that I had. Exactly. I'm like, no.
I thought you were going to say point per dollar, and I was going
to we could argue point per dollar.
Cheap.
Fine. I had DJ Moore point per dollar. Fine.
Yeah.
No. He had him with the same projection as Devontae Adams and above Tyreek Hill, and above all Deebo Sam, above all of those 7K Cooper Kupp. I'm like, no, that's he essentially had him at 22 points instead of 14. And I'm like, well, that can't be right.
No.
Or I mean, to me, that can't possibly be right. But I could understand if you told me that you had OBJ equal or even slightly higher projected than Amari Cooper at 6,000. I didn't, but I could get it. But the problem that I have, it's not a problem. It's the befuddlement I have. Is when, and this is why I like listening to shows and reading content. I don't make my own projections, right? I'm using projections from around the industry, the same sites that are writing content and doing shows.
Yep.
So why is it that when I look at all the projections, and sometimes I will go through and go, this projection source only, what comes up for it? This projection source only, and I'm going through, and OBJ is in none of the optimals, right? None of them, in anywhere. And I agree with that. None of them. There's no, and yet 5,800 OBJ, got to play in DK Cash, got to play 6,600 OBJ in FanDuel. It's like, I I don't get the disconnect. It's either I don't get it or it's that it really, to me, it's a what would you call an art versus science
Yeah.
type of thing. Like
Yep.
the type I'm going to say this in the nicest way because I'm going to insult people, but if I don't, uh, if everything you do is put into the projections, then what's in what I call the content should be you explaining the projections,
Correct.
right? Like that's how
And
I
the
always
and
explain
the
content.
range of the range of the projections, and like you said, the inputs into the projections, and like we've talked about this plenty of times in the past. What does Derrick Henry's projection mean versus what does Christian McCaffrey's projection mean? Like what goes into those is wildly different, and that can be important for how you
Right,
view that person on the
but
slate,
Eric, at
right?
the end of the day, you're essentially explain like if I read an entire article of like here's a 4,000 word article of all the best plays.
Yeah.
Like I instead of reading the 4,000 word article, I just download your projections and just sort by salary adjusted value and like I could get there in 5 seconds.
Hmm.
And hey, if you're the type that doesn't I don't trust numbers, fine. Feel free to read why they project the way that they do.
Hmm.
Fine. But then I don't get the fact that like when there's a disconnect between the two of like because I'm sitting there go in my DK cash lineup go, do I play OBJ to block? Or do I play Cooper, who's 3 points higher projected in this
I
lineup?
never
And I
even considered Odell in cash.
right, well, that's the
I never
point.
even
I'm like,
considered.
if I took the names off of it and I didn't listen to any content, I put my ears over my head and didn't read anything. OBJ, I wouldn't have even. It's not like I wouldn't have even considered him. I mean, we wouldn't even be in consideration because I look at the numbers and go, there's no projection has him higher than Cooper. None of them do. So I'm like, now I don't want to make it a OBJ versus Cooper type of argument.
No.
It's more of the generalized point of why is it that a site or content, we both do content, right? And this is the main reason why I like you know me. I never get in this conundrum because I outwardly fucking yell at people and say just look at the fucking projections. Who do you like? Well, I
Yeah.
like the ones that have the highest point per dollar in salary adjusted value. There, just
Yeah.
look at it.
And lowest ownership. Yeah.
And for GPP, but I'm not even talking about
Yeah.
GPP. If you just want to know the best raw plays
Best
for
plays.
salary,
Yeah.
right? Just look at that. So I can never like whenever I did tags on I used to have the value tag on NBA. You know,
Yeah.
it was the easiest work I ever had to do. I just sort by point per dollar value, and I click the first 5 names and tag them with a color. Done. Like what else would I be doing? Right? Cash
Yep.
plays. Well, sort by salary, adjusted value. Click, click, click. I mean, what else would you be doing? Like, well, what's your reason behind it? It's like, well, because they're projected well. I mean, for their price.
Hmm.
This is the game that we're
Yep.
playing. So
Yep.
I don't get the OBJ because it's not one site, it's multiple sites. It's like how is it that that you could list like here are all the cash plays and the players that are in that article aren't reflected by the projections from your own site that you like dude I could run the top 100 lineups and I get OBJ in 6 out of 100. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that he's not a catch play, but dude, he's not like a core play or anything like that. So that's I don't know what point I'm trying to make. It's just that the reason why I listen to all this stuff is because I know I knew OBJ's ownership was going to be inflated, regardless of
Me too.
what the math was going to say that he should be.
Mhm.
And yes, I did play some of him, but like I wasn't to me. Like, dude, if you can't get your projections to even give him a better projection than half the other receivers, like what? Like, to me, all it is inflated. It's not even narrative based. Like narrative based type of stuff, I could get. The projection isn't as good, but type of thing. But you can't just tell me that. I mean, the James thing is ridiculous. There's no way that he should have been the second highest raw point projected
No.
perceived. But
No offense,
you kind of
James.
get what
No
I'm saying.
offense, James.
It's more of a
Your shit's
bugbear I have with
broken.
content than I have with the projection of like shouldn't your plays, quote unquote, like match one of the I mean, like just like in the top 100 or something. I mean, like I would get like if James's projections jammed in, it would jam in OBJ into cash games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right
Mm-hmm.
now, I don't use James's projections, but I mean, I don't think he should have been projected for 22. But if it would have reflected that. But then you got you
true,
right. So like we always talk about it, even on the pregame show. Whatever information you're using, make the decision, the correct decision based on what you're looking at. Right. So if someone told me, well, my projection had OBJ at 1 point higher than Cooper, so that's why I played OBJ over Cooper in cash, I'd go, then you're absolutely correct. So we're not arguing over the decision. We're arguing over the projection, right? Whether or not the projection was more or less accurate. But if you're looking at a guy that's a point higher, like a lot of people in the Blitz chat played Najee Harris over DJ Moore. Najee Harris projected for 1 point higher, raw point higher than DJ Moore, and a lot of people played him in the flex, and I still think they got there. But my aggregate had Moore a half a point higher than him, so the blitz was higher on Harris and a little bit lower on Moore, and that was kind of the outlier. So if you just looked at that, you would have played Harris in cash or whatever. Obviously, the strategic decision would be, why don't you play DJ Moore because he's going to be 35 to 40% owned instead, and is it worth that 1 point? Like, you can make that would be a strategic decision that is against the projections that you're using. But if you're just using the projections, I couldn't blame anyone. People in the Blitz are like, we should have played Moore over Harris. I go, did Harris reject better than Moore? Yeah, so then all we're arguing about is a projection, not a decision. Like, you shouldn't knowingly play someone less projected. I played Dak in cash because I knew he'd be higher owned, and the projection difference between Dak and Hurts was so marginal that I'd rather just side with Dak. And the 200 in price was a late swap. Like, I originally was going to play Engram, but then I played Disley because then at least I have 2 spots. I could go to Kittle if I'm behind. And the same thing for Westbrook and Samuel. I agreed with you on the morning show on Sunday. Curtis Samuel is a better football player. Like, the only issue with Curtis Samuel, if we knew Curtis Samuel was going to play the snaps he played, he would have projected better than Westbrook, right? But we just didn't know. So originally I was going to play Samuel. I'm like, screw this. I'm not playing this fucking Westbrook guy. Fucking, we don't know. Josh Reynolds, Marcus Johnson. We don't know what the fuck is going on with the Titans. But I knew he was going to be 40 to 50% owned in cash games. If Westbrook puts up a 19-point game and Samuel puts up 5 points and I lose all my double ups on that decision, why make it be that decision? So I just played. Why let the projection difference was so marginal that I'm going to play the higher owned guy. But to me, those are the strategic decisions that go against the projection, like the complete raw projection. I believe my top optimal in DK Cash, aggregate wise, was Josh Allen at quarterback and no Derrick Henry. So you played 3, basically you played like Montgomery, Hubbard, like some and Sermon
Davis
or Davis, right? Something like that. So you went 3 cheap running backs. And I looked at that and I said, Derrick Henry is going to be like 60 to 70% owned in cash games, and I'm not going to get burned by Derrick Henry. And then, but the point is that I clicked in Henry and then looked at the optimal. From that, the difference was 0.08. So it's like, am I willing to let $10,000 ride on a less than a tenth of a point of a projection when I know that that if I play Derrick Henry, like I can't get burned by it. Right? Or same for Westbrook and Samuel. To me, those are the strict, like I said, like, well, you just go by projection. Well, there's still, if you want to make it, some strategic thing. Now, would you give up 4 points in projection for that? No, I would not.
No.
We're talking about
Right.
very, very, very small differences.
Yep.
So that's what it comes back with the OBJ stuff of like, if you played OBJ not because for some strategic reason, I don't even think that existed because OBJ ended up being higher owned. Like, if OBJ was 4% owned and Cooper was 17% owned, okay, now we're not even having this conversation. I go, yeah, he projected 3 points lower, but he was 4 times less owned. But I mean, OBJ was more owned.
Yeah.
So like he wasn't sneaky anymore, and he was lower projected. So how does that end up in content continuing to happen?
He was the steamiest play of the year, I think. Probably.
But at some point you have to stop steaming. At some point you have to realize that, like, just like me and you came to the conclusion by Sunday morning or Saturday night, I'd love to play OBJ and Justin Jefferson together, but it turns out that OBJ on Tuesday I could have projected him for 7% ownership, and now he's going to be 14% owned by Sunday morning, and therefore he's actually not a good play anymore. Right. But like nothing ever reflects that. Like, dude, they're not sneaky, and it's not sneaky anymore. This is, ETR had the game as the top GPP game scores. Like, you have to realize that what you're it's one of those. You have to realize what you're looking at is actively affecting the ownership and how everyone else is going to play. Now, obviously, if you subscribe to a site and it's a bunch of you and 6 people, I mean, probably that's not going to matter, right? But it's like, dude, I look at ETR, I look at Awesemo, right? And I go like, dude, like, I look at their projections, I look at their content, and I go, that even the ownership is wrong. Even the I can't see. It's like oh, they have OBJ at 8% and they have OBJ at 9%. And I'm like, no, I'm putting in 14, right? Yeah. I'm listening the entire fucking week to this shit, right?
Yeah, you can't be, and I do think ETR specifically and a handful of Roto Grinders has some to do with it as well. Like if you listen to, say, the Pick Six with Reeves, Reeves is not as influential as ETR
or
is and
World
stuff, but
podcast,
Roto World
or NBC Sports Edge. I'm sorry,
NBC. Yeah, I still call it. I didn't even flinch. I was just like, yep, Roto World. I still type in Roto World. I'm not typing in NBC Sports Edge. Never.
But to make it clear, it's not like people are doing it on purpose.
No,
like
and this isn't
up
even like
and in fact, most of the time you'll hear someone like Leone go, "I played OBJ to be sneaky," and he's 26 for like we had Metcalf. Like it's like I'm playing. No one's playing this guy, and he's like, oh, he ends up being the highest on wide receiver because everyone is thinking no one's playing that guy. Well, so it's no one's benefiting by it. But I don't even think the content creators are realizing that the more it's kind of a fucked up thing to say. The more and more you talk about the plays, the less and less they become good plays.
Yeah, that's absolutely where we are now. Like
in
as
GPPs,
a space,
at least.
In GPPs, yeah, and ETR is definitely at the core of that, along with other sites, including the one that both of us work for, and it is. I actually felt that's like one of the things that I felt like I fucked everything else up about the slate yesterday, but that was one I felt like really actually passionate about, and it was like, dude, no one will shut the fuck up about the Browns Vikings game, right? And like you said, ETR's top GPP game score. That's like they kept talking about it as Jefferson and Odell, Thielen,
Dalvin Cook
Baker,
coming off the injury.
Dalvin.
Maybe he's not going to be owned.
Right. Everybody kept talking about that. Overzet, he gets a lot of viewers on his stuff. He's talking about all the same thing because he's a lot of times in lockstep with like Leone and those guys. Like I said, Reeves is talking about it. Silva's talking about it. Levitan's talking about it.
But the thing is, Eric, the projections who are input by these people don't reflect that.
Yeah, and that's what I think. I'm gonna like.
I'm not talking about reflecting the ownership. I'm talking about literally reflect. Like you're putting in a 27% target share. You're putting in the efficiency. You're putting in that manually, and the projection is staring at your face, being that like from a point per dollar value, they're 16th at wide receiver. Like at some point, like what? Like when is maybe he's good at low ownership, but not like he's still. Like I'm looking like here, I saved my lineup HQ because we have a results DB is down, so I had to use
Yeah,
it
I
for
know.
the early show. I'm gonna go to my aggregate, which is an aggregate from around the industry. Okay,
Mhm.
so nothing gets like the blitz gets a little bit more of a weight than anything else. But I'm going to wide receiver, and I'm going by salary adjusted value. Okay, so
Mhm.
that equates the price of the player. So it's not just point per dollar. Odell Beckham is, let's see. This is how far you have to go down in order to get Odell Beckham. So like, this RGV, the salary adjusted plus minus, is a great gauge for cash games. Okay,
Yeah.
if you use
Yep.
that in lineup HQ, I'm going to go down this list. Devontae Adams, number one. We both agree with that, right?
Correct.
DJ
Yes.
Moore, number two.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Cooper Kupp, number three. Makes sense. You're probably
Yep.
playing Adams over Kupp, so you can't get both of them in.
Right.
Debo Samuel, number four, at 6,500. We have
Makes
no
sense.
problems with this. Amari
No.
Cooper at 6,000.
Obviously, yes.
Ridley at 7,000.
That
Lamb
was
at
another. Can we take a super quick side? Ridley is not that. It's not the same thing, but similar to where I came into Sunday thinking some of the same things. Other people were like, "Oh, Atlanta, Washington looks good. Atlanta, Washington looks good." And then I'm running all these optimals again. I use the Blitz. The Blitz is the projection source that I use. Ridley's in everything. Ridley's
right.
in
Originally projected
the
very well in the blitz in
Ridley was in
comparison.
the cash optimal on every site in the blitz, and everybody keeps telling me about how sneaky all this stuff is, and I am looking at some of the ownership projections, and I'm like, Ridley doesn't look that sneaky to like he doesn't look. Everybody thinks like, oh, this is the sneaky pivot or whatever, and like this, it was this like the same thing as Odell.
Right,
Like
I
it,
projected Ridley for 11% ownership, even though I think RG had him at most places had him at single digits, and
yeah, and I thought that was
I
wrong.
bumped him up. I said
Yep.
like there's no way that he's not at least double digit owned.
Yeah,
We got Lamb there,
of
Tyreek
course.
Hill, and we're talking about salary adjusted value. I got Robert
Yeah,
Woods
yeah,
at
yeah.
5,300, Terry McLaurin at 6,900, Stephon Diggs at 7,600, DK Metcalf at 7,200. Now, I understand that these 7K receivers, you're probably going to only be able to fit one, and you're probably
Right.
playing Devontae Adams.
Content.
You're probably
Yeah.
playing Devontae Adams and DJ Moore already.
Yep.
So now you could only, like, you need a 5 to 6K receiver at best, or Westbrook Ikine or something like that.
Yep.
But above, I mean, I'm still not at OBJ. Deontay Johnson at 6,200. Tell me why Deontay Johnson at 6,200. Deontay Johnson, I had him projected for 1.5 more raw points than OBJ. He was 400 more. Justin Jefferson, 7,300. Tyler Lockett, 7,100. Then Robbie Anderson, Cole Beasley, Corey Davis, Cortland Sutton, and then OBJ at 5,800. This is an aggregate. So it's not like I'm making. You can't say that like, oh well, the way that you make projections, maybe it's like, dude, I'm the sites that we're talking about. That's where I'm getting the projections from. So that to me, that is it a bug? What am I complaining? I don't even know what I'm complaining about, other than
I don't either. I think it's
well, I'm not
something that
complaining.
is
I mean, to me,
complaining.
it's an edge.
No, but I think it's a fascinating discussion point because we see this frequently. We've talked about it probably a little bit more with like running backs. I mean, this is not the exact same thing, but we started off the whole show talking about like why the fuck was Cordero Patterson like 20+%
He actually
on
did not
FanDuel? And
project all that badly on FanDuel.
I know he didn't, but that was still kind of wild
Yeah, you're right.
to see. But and we used to talk about like James Robinson last year. It was like it did not matter what James Robinson's price was or really what his projection was. If you played the Millie, James Robinson's was 15%. Like it did like it's not
Yeah, but that's
nothing
against projections. What I'm talking about
right.
is I don't understand how a site that makes projections ends up with players that it's like, oh, did for cash games especially, right? We're talking about like we had the whole fucking bend the better crap, right?
Yeah.
Which
Yep.
I don't care if it's a troll or not. I have nothing to do. I didn't have any showdown lineups. I'm watching the Patriots, whatever. I'll go and fucking fuck around with them. With like, there's only a certain amount of like viable play. Like you'd say there's a viable pool of players that you'd play in cash.
Yeah.
right? So like on this slate, there may be 20 to 24 players that I'd say like if you at least had if you had 9 slots with these 24 pieces and you made a lineup with any 9 of them that fit together, I wouldn't call you a donkey, right? Yeah. I may have thought one was better than the other, but like you wouldn't be like off the board or anything like that. But that's how limited like cash games are, right? Like in cash games, like if people didn't play Montgomery and they played Trey Sermon in that spot and they upgraded somewhere else, like I don't blame you. I mean, I don't look at that and go, you're an idiot, right? I saw the running. You played Chubba Hubbard, even if you played Mike Davis. Even though the Gilcast guys want Nate to take an L, but I'm on Nate's side. They were all viable, but I mean, if you were playing like I mean, some of these wide receivers. I mean, if you were playing instead of Devontae Adams, you played Cooper Kupp. I think you were giving up 1.5 and 2 points of projection, but I wouldn't call you stupid. Right? I'd be like, okay, that's viable. But I mean, if you played Brandon Cooks at 6,400 over OBJ, I'd say you're stupid. You would have much rather played OBJ, but I think you would have much rather played Amari Cooper. But I think OBJ was in that pool of play. Like, so it's like we're not even talking about like, oh, why was OBJ anywhere in the discussion? Like, no, I get it. But he was on the bottom of all that. I just don't understand why. If you're making, and this is coming from someone that doesn't make projections. I know I'm harping on the same thing over and over again. Maybe someone could tell me, okay? The thing that I like about Cardi with the blitz is that he puts in what he's the type of person that he's going to put in what should be put in. And if something comes out and goes, wow, that's weird, that guy projects really well, he's not going to do anything to like, he's going to look into if there's an error or something. You know, typed in an extra 1. This guy's not going to have 110% target share, right? You know, like something like that. That he tests his system for months, years. That if that's what it says, that is what it says. And there's no like he'll find the reasons why just to explain it to you. But outside of that, it's like, well, once I put in all this information and all the range of outcomes for this and the range of outcomes of that, the team totals and the weather and all the variables, it's like, well, Mike Davis projects well. Like, well, I don't want to play Mike Davis. He's horrible. It's like, what am I supposed to say? He's not he's horrible, and ignore that projection. Because once you ignore that projection, then it's like, why don't you just ignore all the projections then? Because the same things that are making up Mike Davis's projection is making up David Montgomery's projection. So you can't just pick and choose that. But Derek Hardy never says, Mike Davis projects well, but he's not a good play. Right? David Montgomery projects well, but he's not a good play. Right? Like, or this guy, like, McCole Hardman doesn't project well for 4,400. Yet I think he's a good like you never hear that because it's just like whatever the numbers say. So how is that so much of a disconnect from certain sites, including Roto Grinders, right? Where
it happens everywhere.
It happens everywhere, right? Well, that's what I'm saying. It happens everywhere where because we're just talking about good plays. I'm not talking about GPP. We're not talking about ownership. We're not talking about anything like that. That why don't the projections reflect that? Like, if this guy was such a good play, why does he only show up in 6 of top 100 optimals? If this guy is such a bad play, why does he show up in 78 of 100 of them? Like, then even if you have to go in and just say, oh, I know that this is wrong, but I need to put in these inputs to make this projection lower on Mike Davis, at least then the output doesn't make it look like, I mean, you shouldn't be doing that. But at least it would be consistent. If you want to bump OBJ up to a 38% target share, just a 38% target share on a 97% catch rate, and bump up the Browns team total to 57 in order to get OBJ up to Devontae Adams, at least then your numbers would be consistent, right? At least then it's like, okay, well, obviously OBJ is the top play because I'm looking at your goddamn projections, and he projects better than Devontae Adams, right? So to me, that's the thing that as a content creator, not as a DFS player, I could give a fuck about it. You know, if anything, it benefits me. But as a content creator, it's a pet peeve of mine because it makes people look bad. Any it it comes back to me of, well, who do I like? And I go, well, look at the projections. And then they go, well, I watch all these other shows and read this all this stuff, and they don't say look at the projections. They tell me. I said, yeah, but the stuff that they tell you should be in their projections. Maybe their projections are slightly different, and maybe they have different but it should be reflected in the same thing. And when it isn't, it kind of pisses me off as a content creator.
And so it's such a perfect segue into I don't know if you watch Lols with Brick and Peter, but I really like listening to Brick. He's also like opened up a lot more lately about DFS and DFS process, and it's been really, really insightful. But this is this is something that you know, and then I've even know, but the way he said it, I thought was really powerful. He was basically like, at the end of the day, this is all like guesswork, right? And that phrase has just like, it's ingrained in my brain. And it actually has really, really helped me think about not necessarily this exact thing, but just like DFS in general. Just like, it's all guesswork. Like what he's doing is like about 10 million times more precise than what I do. But his is still he's guessing. We're all guessing.
Whoever can
right?
guess the best wins.
Whoever guesses the best and play a long run and plays the game the best, right? That's what we're trying to do. And so this idea though of guesswork to me is what drives all of this. No, so Cardi is the opposite. Cardi is still doing everything is guesswork, right? But Cardi is like, this is my process. These are the inputs. This is what it is, right? Mike Davis is a good play. He's like, Cardi could be like, I watch football too. Yes, I think Mike Davis sucks, but guess what? This is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it. He is a good play. You don't have to like it.
Right. If he's going to get 60% of the snaps, if he's going to get 15 carries and 3 to 4 targets on the Falcons versus the Washington football team at home with this team total, with their run, pass, and the pace of the game. Like, take out Mike Davis and put in literally any name in there.
Put in Cordero Patterson.
Right. If Cordell Patterson, right. Cordell Patterson is seeing 25% of the, that type of thing. But isn't that the point that I'm making of like,
and so
why would it be different?
Thing. Yeah. So this guesswork thing, I think there is still maybe more, and maybe you might disagree on this, but I feel like in NFL more than any other sport, people are more willing to input this human element with the understanding that these projections are like not flawed, right? But like you can't fit every nuance of football, like with the small samples that we have, right? With everything, with how good the player is, right? So like people just question in football more than like nobody really questions an NBA projection.
No, really, it's the complete opposite. In NBA, it's almost as the projection is the projection, and don't even bother.
Yeah. So you actually have more. You actually have more outs to just being like, actually, this projection might be wrong in NBA. Even though whether you believe that or not, questioning the projections in NBA versus in NFL, people will question even whatever their projection says. Right? They'll be like, no, I see the matchup is awesome for Odell. Look at all the targets he got last week. Look how good he's been for his entire career. Blah blah blah. Right? And so it becomes double counting, or like, because that it's guesswork, putting together that it's like Levitan called, like, I'm not saying Levitan calls it for this Odell thing, but he's like coined the phrase, right? I know better, right? And he uses that sometimes, and sometimes that's fine. Like I do that too. Like sometimes it's fine to be like, no, this is what the projection says, but I don't agree with it, and that's okay. But to your point, like when we're talking about we're narrowing down like a cash game pool, I do think we have like started to reach the point where, and not even just around a cash game pool, but we have sites like ETR, sites like RotoGrinders, sites like NBC Sports Edge, sites like, whoever, right? Awesemo, talking about this play. This is the highest leverage play. Odell and the Vikings are the best GPP. That's the best GPP game of the week. And you talk about that all week. And then you also have like kind of more of the football guys on staff, right? Talking about why this is such a good spot for Odell, right? Oh, he looked awesome in his first game back. He actually should have done better, but he was just winded, right? There's all the football takes. And those are totally reasonable football takes. But I feel like people are willing to apply these call them narrative, right? Call them the human element of things, and take the fact that these projections are a little bit more of guesswork and apply this kind of nuance or I know better mentality to football specifically. And like you said, NBA, it's like the opposite. Everybody's just like, oh, who's the best play? Who gets, well, this guy is a 8x multiplier on his salary. He's the best play. No one questions it. But in football, it's like, no, like I watched the game. Or I think that the projection is wrong on Odell, and he's in that happens not a lot in general. Still, the best projections are the highest owned plays or whatever. But we see this every so often, and I almost feel like we're seeing it more. Again, I know you were talking a lot more about cash games, but pivoting it to tournaments a little bit more. We see this, right? It's really funny because Overzet tweeted it. He made the full tout transition the other day and tweeted out like, here are the sneaky plays or whatever for this week that everybody thinks are sneaky tournament plays. And so in fact, they're not going to be sneaky at all. And he said, he mentioned Odell. Right. And I was like, Odell, Robbie, and he was like a Hurts skinny stack. And I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. You nailed it. And then I think he played all those. Like I know he played Odell and stuff, but I was like, that's absolutely true. And so we've kind of made this crazy transition into a lot of what I like, what's kind of talking about with people are willing to, question the projections and do the I know better thing, with still very projections focused. But there's just like here and there are those spots. And it's usually paired with like, this is the best GPP game of the week, or, everybody, we have to pivot off of Amari Cooper because he's going to be chalky, and there's Odell for 200 less at half the ownership or whatever. And then the next thing you see, Odell's like the highest owned wide receiver of the slate.
But what you're describing is truthfully not what top DFS players do.
Correct.
Like we go back to Brian Brick. Dude, he has his process. He runs it through. He doesn't even watch the games. I mean, like either OBJ is a project. Like there's most of the. If you look at the top players, like it's more of what I'm talking about. Of like the numbers are the numbers. I'm gonna run simulations. I'm gonna spit out 150 lineups, and I'm gonna go to brunch. Right? I mean, like that is what it is. So unless it's reflected unless it could be actually quantified, even though we're still dealing with fragile ranges of outcomes, like at least it should be that. So like I give the example of like you're saying like OBJ, all the narrative on there. I literally heard no one. I don't think I heard a single fucking person talk about Deontay Johnson at 6,200 with Claypool out facing the Packers. Probably because Ben Roethlisberger's washed and he can only throw the ball 3 yards, right? Like that.
And Jair Alexander, people love the.
But Deontay Johnson isn't an outside. I mean, like the Steelers don't run an
He plays out. He played. Yeah,
but they don't throw the ball 20 yards. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger throws the ball 6 yards. But I'm just saying that the difference between even if you're going to say that OBJ should be higher projected than Deontay Johnson, it's not significant enough where there's 8 hours of discussion on OBJ and someone that maybe throw in Deontay Johnson if you want to get if you play like that's what I'm talking about. Or people calling. Here's a funny one. I think you'll appreciate this. This is kind of we're kind of dunking on ourselves a little bit.
Easy to do for me right now.
After that, especially after the third touchdown, Cordell Patterson, like people calling on who are the people that played Cordell Patterson? Those slapdicks, right? Slapdicks, numbnuts, all that. The guy only plays like 26% of the snaps, right? He only plays 26% of the snaps, and in week 4, he converts that into 3 touchdowns. Isn't that the same when everyone played Rondell Moore in week 2?
100%,
right?
100%, and countless other guys similar. We will make the excuse when it fits our narrative, right? But like I actually brought this up yesterday with Gretch. He was mad at me because I brought up CPAT and I was like, I think people are going to play Mike Davis at this because I'm looking at projections, right? I think people are like, I'm not saying play Cordero Patterson on DraftKings, but I'm like, why is he really that different from all of these other guys, in this DraftKings range? But everybody has decided he's not sustainable. He can't keep doing this, right?
Right, but
We decide,
Adam Thielen's not sustainable. You can't play him
yeah,
ever.
yeah. But wait till Rondale gets more snaps. That's the narrative.
Wait till
right?
Andy Isabella finally gets out there.
Hey, listen, that Andy Isabella 80-yard touchdown last year was one of the greatest moments of my fantasy football career.
There's always, but you realize there's always one guy every year that's like that.
But it every single year, and I always I always seem to fall on that landmine. But like, it is so funny though, right? Like we make the narrative stick for Odell. We make the narrative like play to our favor for Rondale Moore. He's going to continue getting better, right? He's a rookie. He's going to play more snaps as the season goes on. Maybe it's a reasonable take, right? I've said that like a best ball over the offseason. I'm like, draft the younger guys because as the season goes on, they'll get better. I agree with that general premise, but we don't get to pick and choose when it applies to every single other player. And so CPAT, I know he didn't. It's not like he played more this week, but it's like, who on this offense has earned more snaps, do you think, on the Falcons? Not Mike Davis, not Kyle Pitts. Russell Gage is dust. I mean, I guess Ridley, but he already plays every snap. Who earned more snaps? Cordell Patterson. He's the only one doing anything on the whole offense. And people are like, nope, can't do it. But got to play Rondale Moore. Wait till Rondale Moore, gets more snaps. Wait till Terrace Marshall gets more snaps. And it's like, we pick and choose when to apply the non-project. That kind of going back to like the projection thing is we choose when to do the I know better thing. And I'm not even saying it's wrong because I do a little bit of that. Like you talked about the tags in lineup HQ. I do conviction plays in lineup HQ, and my general process is definitely different than yours. But it is one like leverage plays, right? Like I always like to use Devontae Adams is 40% and Aaron Jones is 10%. Like I think this one looks pretty straightforward. Or I am kind of trying to spot not necessarily where I think the projections are wrong, but either where they're like most fragile or maybe where I think that there's more up. So Corey Davis was one. Corey Davis and Darnell Mooney were two of them I did this week because I thought that the upside, like basically the ceiling was higher than what we were saying, and probably the floor was higher than what we were saying. But I was giving reasons basically as to why some of the inputs to the projections could be different, or a high leverage guy basically is I'm trying to find these high leverage plays based on XYZ. And so like doing that, I do a little bit of the like I know better type of thing, but it's from this like tournament angle. It wouldn't be for Odell, who's the highest owned wide. Like that doesn't make any sense. Like you wouldn't be pushing for Odell in tournaments if you realize he's actually going to end up being, like he was like 25% in the Mega Millionaire or whatever, the 4,000. I mean, he was absurdly owned, like seriously absurdly owned. And so, it is a very, very, I've found it to be the most fascinating part of DFS right now is because I do think it's very, very projection focused, as it should be. And ownership generally follows the projection. But like we get those situations. Sometimes we get, the situations like Cooper Kupp, like he definitely projects better, not this week, but in past weeks. Like he definitely projects better. He's going to be quite a bit more owned. Okay, that's interesting. Let's look at pivots or whatever. And then we get situations like this week where there was like, I mean, how many have you named, right? There's 20 wide receivers.
Why wasn't your point? Does that apply to me? Would I be out of line to say that DJ Moore this past week was the equivalent of Cooper Kupp last week? DJ Moore should be a $7,800 wide receiver. Yes. Yet for some odd reason, Cooper Kupp was fine. Like last week, you had to jam like Cooper Kupp at 6,800 was. I mean, he was 33% owned. I mean, he was like mega owned, and DJ Moore. I think DJ Moore and Cooper Kupp are the equal. I mean, those offenses.
I know people don't care about this, but I'm literally in the midst of updating my like in-season rankings for Spike Week. DJ Moore is right behind Coop. They're to your point. I have them like literally right next to each other. They're basically the same player to me.
Do you
So yeah,
do you think the reason why he wasn't? And I mean, he still was one of the highest owned wide receivers. But I mean, I would have expected 25-30% ownership on DJ Moore. That's what
I forced him in. I forced him in cash. The first run that I made on DraftKings actually didn't have DJ Moore because I'm using the blitz, and I forced DJ Moore in cash on all sites, no matter what, because that was my expectation. I'm like, I don't really give a shit what the optimal runs here. Like I have to have DJ Moore because every single person's going to have DJ Moore. And then like you said, you show up in tournaments and I was like mad at myself. I'm like, I just should have played Darnold and DJ Moore. This was an easy game. I just like, why did I make it so difficult?
But do you think that it's due, that narrative is going the other way of like DJ Moore isn't an alpha. DJ Moore doesn't catch touchdowns, right? We have and this is not this is a previous. We're comparing DJ Moore in an offense that was had Teddy Bridgewater or Kyle Allen with Christian McCaffrey and Curtis Samuel in it.
Yep.
Okay. And then we're going to an offense with a Sam Darnold, who, despite what some people think, I think is actually an above average quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
He was stuck on the Jets. And now he has no McCaffrey. He has a rookie running back that obviously they're not going to give that much of a workload to him. And he's competing for targets with Robbie Anderson, who essentially has become a field stretcher, and Terrence Marshall, who is essentially the fifth option on the team that gets if he happens to get it.
He's fine.
Right.
He's whatever. He's fine.
Right. So it's like, not like dude, Cooper Kupp has Robert Woods, Tyler Higbee, and Van Jefferson. And Van Jefferson's actually drawing more of a target share than people think. And he's 3,900 and people didn't play him.
And a good running game. And a good running game.
Right. As opposed to the Panthers currently. Why Cooper Kupp 7,800? I have no problem with that. DJ Moore, I mean, it's the same thing. If he was the same price as Devontae Adams, you always put Adams above him, right? But you could also say the same. I mean, truthfully, you could say the same thing with Deebo Samuel.
Yeah.
I mean, like other than the fact that the disconnect with Samuel is that 49ers, Shanahan, run first offense. Jimmy G sucks, right? Deontay Johnson, he can't play. Ben is awful. He's washed, right? Stafford's so much better than Goff. So obviously Cooper Kupp is his favorite receiver now, right? Even though Woods has gotten plenty of targets, he's just not good targets. Actually, it seems like Cooper Kupp is just, for 2 games, was just open miraculously. And Woods is always in this matchup where he's catching balls like with a half-foot separation while he's slanting across the field. People are already like halfway through the game in the Rams game. People are like, I guess Robert Woods isn't a thing anymore. Like, who says, like, dude, he outscored Cooper Kupp, right? Right? He got the touchdown, right? He actually had more. Cooper Kupp had more targets, but it was a very inefficient offense. But
13 targets and five catches. They were bad. The Rams were really bad yesterday.
But people want to make Brandon Ayuk happen, and Deebo Samuel is the alpha. How come we have no problem talking about Terry McLaurin as the alpha with quarterbacks that are even worse, right? And like Deebo Samuel, well, Kittle's there and Ayuk, and they run the ball a lot. It's like. Dude, the numbers say that. Like, but people were surprised. I heard some people on Twitter or whatever. I was surprised how owned Deebo Samuel was. Dude, he was like the 4th highest, best projected wide receiver on the entire slate. Like, your numbers should have told you that. And then some people would say, yeah, the numbers told me that, but I know better.
Yeah, that's
right?
that's what it is, right? It is. We pick and choose, which I know we're doing that thing again, but it's in a little different context. Is we pick and choose when to adjust our priors. When can we say that DJ Moore is this level of alpha? When can we say, like, what about Brandon Ayuk? What about when can we say Deebo is this guy? And then on the flip side, right? Like you said, okay, we've seen it for a year. with Terry McLaurin or whatever. I'm just throwing shit out there, right? We've seen it. But Cooper Kupp did it, and he had, like you said, he has Matthew Stafford. And he's got like one more target or whatever than DJ Moore. Like, it's so silly. But like Cooper Kupp, yep, confirmed. Cooper Kupp is now an $8,000 wide receiver, and I think he is. But like, why isn't DJ Moore? Why isn't Deebo Samuel? And then people will counter with like, well, yeah, like you said, Brandon Ayuk is there and George Kittle is there. He's not going to keep this up. Well, why is Cooper Kupp going to keep it up? What's the difference? Why is quite frankly, look at Tyreek. I mean, we know how good Tyreek is, so I get that. Like, I'm not questioning, obviously, anything about Tyreek Hill, but he's had two horrible games and then two insane games. He has games where he's not the target dominator at all. He's kind of for as good as he is, he's actually a little bit more, gadget is not the right word, but he's a specific archetype of a player that isn't just Devontae. Devontae is just gonna be Devontae. Like, nothing really matters for Devontae Adams.
I think the Cowboys. I think we've had enough evidence after 4 games. The Cowboys are the Seahawks now.
As in only one guy.
No. As far as going into this season, what did we think? We're going to go back to the games,
right?
Right, we're going back to the games where Dak played last year, and they're chucking the ball. They're throwing the ball 50 times. And in the first game, which they were down, Dak threw 58 passes.
And playing the Bucks, who everyone that's what, again, if you listen to people much smarter than I, and the data backs it up, you just don't run on Tampa. Right? New England, they had negative rushing yards last night against it. You can't run on that team, so everyone just throws, right? The Rams threw it 50-something times. The Patriots threw it 50-something times. That's all everyone does. And so we latched. That was confirmation bias, like, to like the maximum, right?
Everyone's like, oh, you could double stack Dak. He could support 2 6K wide receivers.
Week, right? Yep.
And now you play him, and it's like Zeke, and then Zeke is washed. Right? Yeah. And Dak's going to chuck the ball. And the past 3 games, like, we see Dak Prescott with Russell Wilson-like passing lines. And you see Lamb and Cooper with Metcalf and Lockett passing lines. Because when you play Tyler Lockett, it's not like you're expecting 10 targets. When you play Metcalf, you're not expecting 10 targets. You're expecting 6 targets, 130 yards, because he's taking one to the house.
Yep.
Same for just because that's the way the Seahawks play. They're going to run the ball or they're going to throw the ball over 25 yards. So that's why you get the Russell Wilson 20 for 26, 355 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Right? Like the efficient games like that. But typically they don't support double stacks. And now we have CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, and people may treat them as if, like, how do you not play CeeDee Lamb next week at 6,100 or 6,200? Like, he's averaging, 8 targets a game. But it's like, is the offense the way it is? Now, if you have some type of mathematical process of regressing the data, the projections will just do it for you. It'll go lower and lower and lower and lower. It could just be the past 3 weeks have been the outlier. Who knows? Maybe. Yeah. They didn't have to throw. In the second half, they were up, and they just they're just gonna just play it safe or whatever like that.
Which that's the guesswork part, right?
Right.
Is like, how do we know which is real? And it's probably, as usual, it's like somewhere in between.
But I think more of the field. Might not be. But I think more of the field is going to continue to look at how do you not play the Cowboys have a 27 implied total? How do we not, and Zeke will be 7% owned. The receivers will be 18% owned, and Zeke will get 25 points and be like, and Pollard will get a touchdown, and people will look and go with their dick in their hand, going like, oh, but they throw the ball. Like, dude, they haven't. But we could be wrong, we could be right. Like we said last week. I just want to be on whatever side of the market is too overconfident, like the other side of the overconfidence. So we're talking about the same things, like from a project in GPPs. That's why all my complaint about the projections versus content thing is primarily for cash games. Well, who are the good plays? Well, if you write an article that has all the good plays and I run your optimal and like I can't run the top 50 without getting one of them, then they aren't the best plays. Either the projections
Yeah.
are bad, or I mean, do something. But in GPPs, obviously, you're now comparing it to ownership, right? So now,
Yep.
the best plays, if everyone thinks that the Cowboys, oh, they're run first, and now Zeke is 20% owned, and Amari Cooper's sitting there at 4% owned, then I go, maybe they go back to being pass heavy, and right.
Yep.
Look at the Bengals, dude. That for the week before week 1, people looked at those Bengals prices and go Chase, right? Boyd, Higgins, they were all cheap, and Burrow's cheap. Like, dude, they're going to be
That was my
throwing the
whole
ball.
timeline. Yeah, that was
Right,
my
the whole
whole
time, like,
timeline with everybody.
we're going to stack these guys up. They're going to throw the ball 50 times. They come in, and they're the most run-heavy team in the NFL now.
By like a lot.
Large
Like that-
margin.
yeah.
Right, but I guarantee you, there's still some people that, showdown slate or something. Oh, I gotta play these guys, and maybe I'm not saying we're right or they're wrong, but you're still you're guessing at some point. But the thing about what I agree with Brian, and I think when he was talking about guesswork, I think he was talking about more about how much leverage and correlation matter.
Correct.
In comparison to projection. It's not guesswork of the inputs. The inputs are the inputs, and whatever comes out, it comes out. He's talking about primarily GPP play.
Everything is still like, even the inputs you're putting
Yeah, but
in.
once
This is what
I get what you're saying, Eric. But once you put them in, you're done.
right.
So
right,
if you put them in and OBJ comes out as the 16th highest ranked receiver, maybe
Correct.
you should eliminate them from your fucking cash plays article.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if you put in you're the one putting in the inputs, and if he ends up being in your, then fine, I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, Davis is even on the fucking sports grid shit. Yeah, Mike Davis is coming in half our optimals, but I ain't playing him. It's like, well, he has to be a viable play. Either that, or you're really bad at. You can't just disregard one thing or another. But when it comes to leverage and correlation, that's the number one question that I get asked now is, how much projection should I give up for X amount of ownership? And I go, that number. That's what Brian is talking about when it comes to guesswork.
Yeah.
And
that's why he wins. And that's
because he has a process that
he's better at. Yeah.
Right. His system, his simulations will determine that for him. He doesn't have to guess. Me, I'm guessing, and I think that me and you could be directionally accurate enough that we're going to be right way more often than most people in the field. Anyway, when I played 200 lineups. Maybe I make 20 or 30 bad ones. Maybe 20 or 30 of them is like
Right.
those are actually minus EV lineups. But the rest are great, right?
Yeah.
So maybe I sacrifice, if I'm building 150, maybe I have 20 bad lineups. But I'm always going to have an attrition rate of 15% of my lineups are going to be, if you did this a more precise way, you wouldn't have ended up on these 15 lineups. But it's not the type of thing where that I'm ending up on 120 bad lineups, right?
Yeah.
That's
right.
what, like, if you're not directionally accurate. And I've seen some people that, I'm working with, they want to know the settings. And they go, I'm not getting good lineups and blah, blah, blah. I played 3 weeks and I don't know. And I go, just show me your exposures from this past week. You played the mini max or something 150, and I take a look at their exposures, and I just wonder how they even got to these places. So 56% Kadarius Toney. And I go, how did that, like he didn't project well? Like, you didn't, like, what, how did you get there? Like, I look at all, and I go, yeah, you're building really bad lineups. And you're using projections. I literally have to say, you'd have to record how you get to this spot, because I don't even know how you get there.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, dude, oh yeah, the optimizer was giving me a lot of Daniel Jones, Tony Ingram stacks, and I go, with what? Like, do you make your own projections? No. Said what? I use the Gridiron IQ projections on Roto Grinders. So how the fuck are you getting? Did you purposely want Daniel Jones? No, I wanted like 10% Daniel Jones lineups, and I go, how do you get 56% Kadarius Toney? I mean, but that's what I'm talking about. Like, to me, that's how people fuck up using Optimize. Like, and I've seen that plenty of times where people get to places and I go, I don't know. And you get the other way also. You get I have 78% Westbrook Akine. right? Because it just jams in the right, and they don't
Yeah.
realize that that's probably not a good idea to do. It looks good median wise, but like from a fucking ceiling and ownership perspective is awful. But that's to me that's the type of that's the guess. To me that's the game. To me that's the game.
Yep.
And Brian, most top players actually have a more precise, computer programming driven methodology of determining that. But but the thing is, they don't question it. I remember Brian having a stream last year where his top lineups had Naeem Hines, and this is when Naeem Hines was, like, okay, when Jonathan Taylor's hurt, you play him, but other than that, you don't play $4,400 Naeem Hines, getting 40% of the snaps, and that's it. And people on the stream were like, Naeem Hines, he's in your best 4 out of 5 lineups. He's 1% owned. And Brian goes, I don't even it's like he doesn't even know who he is. Ryan's just like, well, that's what it is. It is like he's doing the same thing as Cardi. It is what it is. Like the same system that I've used to make tons of money over multiple years. I put these numbers in and I get these lineups out. So what is I know better? That's the point that's the point that Brian's making with the guesswork of like he's built a way where he doesn't have to guess. His system is profitable. He just puts it in and lineups come out and where you go. I talked to Nerdy Tanner like he takes the blitz projections, he takes whatever aggregate. He has his own simulation methodology. He runs simulation of the contests. He has anti-competitive algorithms and whatever, and then he randomly chooses 150 lineups at a certain diversification to try to be as balanced as possible, and then just like, boom, that's it. So if you asked him, it's like, well, why did you play this guy? Like, there's no, like, the inputs are the inputs. So, like, if you want to argue about the inputs, that's perfectly fine with me. If we have an argument, if there's an argument on like OBJ versus Amari Cooper, and it's like, well, OBJ, I think, is going to have a 27% target share, and go, no, it's going to be 32. And you go, well, I think he historically has a 74% cash rate. It's like, well, in this game, I think he'll have an 82. Like, then his projection starts moving up. So if you've already gotten those inputs, like, and you've agreed to that, then the number's the number.
Yep.
So what's the I know? So tell me. If you're the one putting in the inputs and you know better, quote unquote, then why isn't the number better? Then the number still is the number. I mean, I've said this to even JM when I had him on the show. I said, me and you don't do anything differently other than the fact of like imagine if Jay, who knows the NFL better than me, he wrote the NFL Edge for Roto Grinders for years. It's ridiculously long. End up getting to very similar lineups anyway. And I just tell him it's like he acts like I do something crazy. Like no. All I'm doing is like, all the words that you said to describe why this guy's a good play? Put a number on it. Right? Just put a number on it. 24. Okay, great. Now go to the next player. In comparison to that guy, is that how much better a player? That's 22. So now just put all the numbers on all the players. You analyze all that. Well, there you go. Like you don't even have to do any type of projection variable. Just put numbers on players, right? How much better are they? Or whatever. And then once you have those numbers, just remove the players' names, right? And then now you just filling lineups out with ownership and numbers. Like there's no difference in that. And if you're going to be the ones that put in the input, like it still comes down. I'm still flummoxed by this, Eric. I hope you understand what I'm saying. The people that are putting in the inputs are still getting a poor projection of someone that they think is going to break the slate. That's I don't understand. I don't understand. At least with James, he just fucked. He just said, screw it. I'm giving OBJ a 7 million% target. I don't know how he gets to that.
Odell is Devontae Adams. I don't give a shit what you guys have to say.
To me, I'm less upset. I'm less annoyed by that because it's like, well, fucking. Are you projecting all the receivers the same way that you're projecting Odell Beckham? Yes. Said, are you giving him whatever you think? Yes. Okay, then like, you don't agree. You're 8 points better than fucking anywhere I've ever seen.
Everybody.
But I mean, you're at least going by your own number. I don't think anyone knows. I don't think anyone knows better.
No, and I think a little bit of that, and this is strictly my opinion, coming out of my ass, is with some of the projections, they're a multi-man process at every, knowing a little bit how, well, besides, I don't know what Cardi's process is because I don't ever get to see behind the scenes or anything with the blitz, but how they go at this is a multi-person process. There's multiple, people providing inputs. At the end of the day, like you said, that conversation this is a way too oversimplified way of discussing it, right? But someone says put it at 28% target share, and someone else says put it 30, and someone else says, put this play volume in, and the other person says put this play volume in, right? And you end up on a number, right? Like you said, you end up on a number. And so I think there's a little bit sometimes of like hedging on some of these things. And I do see that a little bit with like the roto grinder stuff. We'll see.
What do you mean by hedging? I don't understand what by bumping up a projection just for the sake of it.
Not. I know better on Odell Beckham. He's the best play of the slate. I'm not saying that's what anybody has said here, right? I believe in what James said. Right. This is me telling this fake story. I believe in what James said about Odell Beckham. He's the best play of the slate. He's the second highest raw points projection of the slate. He's a smash. But I can't put that out there because of XYZ because
it's crazy.
Because it is crazy,
right?
I mean that's kind of it. You like seriously think about it. If you put that out there and as Odell is the second highest raw point, I know James did, but like if Roto Grinders did that or something, people would be like, "Excuse me, what?" Like that's crazy to me.
But if anything, it would be the other way around.
As in,
if anything, Odell, it's the Mike. To me, it happens more like the Mike Davis thing. Guy projects well, and people like, I can't click on that name. So I'm going to say, yeah, even though our stuff says that Mike Davis is like the second best running back play on the slate, we're not going to put him on our cash playlist, right? I mean, it's more likely that happens than because at least the the content is editable. At the end of the day, it's just an opinion. It's just this is what I think. But the numbers are the numbers. So unless you're going to give Mike Davis only a 20% carry share, which you then have, obviously Cordell Patterson's projection starts going up then, because someone's going to, unless you think Wayne Gallman's taking half of the carries, like it has to go, like with the projection system, you have to equal 100% no matter what. So it's much harder to manipulate that. Yet an article, you could say whatever the hell you want.
Yeah.
But the thing is that it's more likely that it's more. Would you agree with me or not? It's more likely that the projections know better than you do.
Oh yeah, almost always. And
especially if you're the one putting in that's the key, Eric. I just want to make it clear to people that are listening. I don't make my own projections. So when I say I trust the projections, I'm essentially trusting the people that put them together. So that also put in the input. That's the reason why I'll get an aggregate, because I don't just want Cardi. I want because I'm not putting in the inputs. I'm talking about you should trust, if you're putting in the inputs and the inputs come out X, Y, and Z, well, why wouldn't you trust the number why wouldn't you trust the number that comes out? The number comes out and says that Jacoby Brissett Jacoby Brissett and Devontae Parker actually show up in optimal lineups, maybe not all of them or something like that. You can't just go, nah, ways. I'm not gonna write about them. I'm not gonna tell anyone. Like, dude, anyone that's using a site is gonna lose your projections and go, why aren't we playing Jacoby Brissett in the lineup? Like, you're the ones that put it in. So either you're wrong or you're ignoring your own inputs.
Yeah, totally random side note. I think when I made a dummy cash team early this week on one of the sites, I think Jacoby Brissett showed up in that. Well, I locked. I forget. It was like early this week because I was going to put a dummy cash team. I think I saw Cardi tweet something about figuring out how to jam Derrick Henry and Devontae Adams and Travis Kelce or something like that. This week. And so I went in to make a dummy cash team and clicked lineup HQ and locked Kelce, Devontae and Derrick Henry, and I think it gave me Jacoby Brissett, which obviously that wasn't the optimal jamming all three of those guys in. But to your point, that is a interesting kind of little funny side story about like, okay, nobody talked about Jacoby Brissett this week, but like there was ways he made it into your optimal lineups.
Well, eventually it becomes Fields. Right, because
right.
Dalton was
this was like Monday, Tuesday or something like that. So that became Fields, like you said. But you know what I mean. You get what I'm saying, and I think it became Heineke. It actually became
Heineke did what I guarantee you. I guarantee you people clicked on some stuff for cash games and like, there's no way I play Taylor Heineke in cash, but your numbers would tell you to do so.
I played Heineke in cash. It was because I didn't play Westbrook. You said like you listened, and I said
did you use that money. Did you play Mooney in cash on DraftKings?
No, but I made money. I made.
But
money
I just thought there's a $700 difference, and the $700 between Prescott and Heineke. I thought that maybe that you were doing that.
I was being stubborn already on fading Westbrook. I didn't want to like take it to. I usually have too much overconfidence in like the Darnell Moonies, and then KJ Hamler week happened and kept my ego in check on the shitty punt wide receivers, and so I was like, I have too much money on Darnell Mooney already. Let's not have my entire week on this guy. And now obviously I did well in cash. I didn't have as good of a score as you did, but I think scored like 150 or something like that.
That swept everything.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but like I said, I was just being stubborn on, and that's where I will do that a little bit, right, wrong, indifferent. I've gotten better about, again, like you said, just kind of, I trust the inputs as it relates to cash games because I've figured out who I trust and what sources and everything that I trust. I will sometimes do that Westbrook thing. And it is also knowing what I'm willing to admit this is me doing the I know better thing, but this is also my money. And I didn't want to put my money behind that, but I also 100%.
But it wasn't the play, Eric. Like you still played a lineup that projected about the same as
close enough.
Like we're not talking about. That's why I said if you played Mooney, you actually played a lower projection. You had to sacrifice a projection.
I had no punts on my team. Well,
right. But I'm saying that if you would have played Mooney in cash, that would have been I know better.
Yes.
I'm going to play, instead of playing a lineup that projects for 145.1, I'm going to play a lineup that projects for 144.98 that has no Westbrook. Like, to me, that's not going against the project. You're sacrificing marginal amounts. But if you're going to be like, well, I don't mind sacrificing 6 points total to get Mooney and OBJ in, like, then what's the point of using any projections then? You might as well just play whatever the hell you want at that point.
It's also what's the point of playing cash games where there's a person who, not trying to call this individual out, but in one of the discords that I'm in, that will come in on a slate and like, as soon as it locks and post like, here's my cash game team. Look, so-and-so's 2% in cash and so-and-so's 4% in cash.
That's not good.
And every week, and then the guy will score 2 touchdowns or something. And it's like, look at that. And I'm like, I'm trying to explain it to you about why that was the absolute wrong way to use your money on the individual player. I'm like, you could have swept cash without ever having to expose yourself to that much risk. And you could have just, if he's 2% in cash, guess what? He's probably super low owned in tournaments too. And you actually have the upside to win real money when you're right about him. Like, why are you doing that? So why are you doing, again, going back to, this is not, and I know Levitan doesn't listen to this, but anybody that this is not a slight on, Levitan has the phrase, right? I know better. And I think it's a good phrase. And so it fits this thing. And this isn't a slight on anybody, but like doing too much of that, I know better, to the Mooney example, like you said, like if I had done that, like, okay, you're giving up 5 points plus just because you wanted to be stubborn about this thing that you think you know better. And you might end up right every once in a while. I might have ended up right if I did that with the Mooney thing.
You're not going to be right 55% of the time, no.
You're not going to do it. And when you only have 17 weeks, I guess like plus playoffs and stuff, I do value like making sure I'm getting my money in good on these cash teams, because this isn't NBA. I don't have 300 slates. I don't have 300 slates to play. I can't be fucking around fancy playing, so many of these.
Especially early in the season when there's softer money
Yes.
It kind of dries
Take
out
your
towards the
edge.
end. Like in the first 4 to 6 weeks of NFL, I'm much more likely to go. I'm just going to play one of the best projected lineups and let you motherfuckers run me down.
Yep.
Then once we get to week 15 and it's getting a little bit more tougher, then it's more of the nuance of like, I think this build is slightly better than that build, and this swap is going to be just like, fuck it. I mean, I'm playing primarily head to heads. So I mean, I'm playing 60% head to heads, 40% double ups, and I look through some of these, and I'm talking about like 109s and 50s even, and I'm just like I'm not gonna see some of these lineups in week 15. Like
No.
you can't survive with some of the. I mean I could go through some. I mean I look for the low numbers at the end of the slate just to give myself an entertainment, because sometimes it's low because people swapped, and that's a different story.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, they only scored 87. And it's like, yeah, because they moved from Devontae Adams to Alan Lazard and some other, because they were way behind. But I mean, sometimes I look at lineups that and just go like this lineup literally projects 30 points lower than. I mean, I don't know. You just bang your head to get this lineup, but that happens more early in NFL, in any sport pretty much, than late. So like you said, you don't want to be I know better and then lose when you could have just literally pressed the optimize button and won 80% of your head-to-heads.
Yep.
Which is something that you may not be able to do later in the season.
Right. And later in the season, I'm sure this is something we'll get into much later. We don't have to like deep dive on week 16 head-to-head strategy, but that is something I will do later in the season. Because to your point, like I will start thinking about like how to leverage again. I know when I'm posting all my head-to-heads in week 16, the type of action that I'm getting is like sometimes you not take stands, right? And not even do like I know better and give up tons of points. But if there are like if you know what the optimal is and you know generally what everybody's doing, little things here, I will play the head-to-head game a little bit more later in the season, because like I know X% of my opponents are going to be on the same 5 or 6 guys. Right. In all my head-to-heads. And so you have to think through, like, do I just want to do 2v2 coin flips for Akia, this weekend? I don't know if I just want, I don't know how I want to play that.
Right,
but I have to think.
This week, for instance, if this was week 16, I wouldn't have played Westbrook and I wouldn't have played Henry. I would have played a more balanced lineup. But on this week, when 65% of my opponents plus are going to be playing Henry, just fuck it. Just give me that. Just give me that lineup. Feel free. Just you make the mistake. You fucking just goddamn make the mistake. Don't play Montgomery, right? Don't play DJ Moore. Yep. Don't play Devontae Adams. Just fucking don't play the Lions. Fucking I'm not gonna. Oh, do I play the Lions or do I go play the Falcons? Like fucking play the Lions. Lions gets 2 fucking defensive scores. I don't want to lose all my money on a fucking 35% owned, 55% owned defense. So just block there. Yeah. Block. Like week 16, that's the time when the later weeks is when you're like, yeah, everyone's going heavy on this type of construction. It's not even a player. It's like, oh, they're sacrificing a wide receiver spot so they could get up at Henry. It's like, I think I could play Trey Sermon in that spot and then play, Robert Woods, and then I think I'm better. And you look at the lineups, you run it through and you go, how much points am I giving up by doing that? 1/10 of a point. Like you're giving up 0.1 point. Like, okay, then, and it's going to be lower owned. So, those weeks, what you do, you enter more triple ups. You enter more 3-mans. Like that's what I'm thinking more later in the NFL season. Now, like you said, you take a look at some of the stuff in the lobby. Just fucking prove it. Prove it that you can build obviously Ben the Better can't.
Oh, that guy. I still struggle to believe that that's real, but honestly,
it's almost
it's really impossible.
He's either real or the greatest parody account ever.
Seriously, and I do like Adam will talk about like I would believe it's a bit if he didn't just continue losing money to everybody.
Right, no, right. He lost $50. He played me in a $50 head-to-head, and he's accusing us of collusion with different lineups, being that we don't talk to each other. and the fact that I didn't even realize that I was even in a head-to-head with him at all. Like, yes, yes, we're colluding together to play the same lineup, not the set, almost the same lineup against you, and then what? Splitting the money, and I'm like, dude, neither of us. I think Adam knew he was playing him in a head-to-head. Me, till that tweet, I didn't even know.
I don't have any idea who I'm playing, and nor do I give a
Right,
shit. Like I have far more important things to look at than
right.
who I'm playing.
But it's the collusion stuff. It's. I mean, I see this in face. If you go into Facebook groups, there's a post like this, like at least once a week.
Yeah.
Reddit's a little dead now, but like once a, it's the there was a math problem. And all these 20 people. I was in class with 20 people taking a math test, right? And they gave me a problem to solve. 19 out of the 20 people all had the same answer. And I had a different one. They all must be cheating. No, it's a math problem. There is only going to be one answer. And in this case, yes, there isn't only going to be one answer, but there's only going to be a very select few answers, right? When it comes to cash games. So like that's when people say like, well, they had 200 people to choose from, and they had the same like yes, yes, because there isn't 200 people to choose from. There's like 20. Because
Right.
all 180 you would never play because their median projection is too low. So it's like this entire conversation. But the only reason I respond, I know you responded to me and said why are you wasting your time, right?
Hmm.
The two reasons are one, I'm bored and nothing to do, and number two, I it's for other people. I mean, one of the things I mean, I don't discuss lineups with anyone. So like I don't even
Yeah.
want the connotation that like, oh, I'm in three mans colluding with obviously you can't collude in head to heads. I mean, that's just fucking stupid to begin with. But I always want to if anyone comes out and say, "Oh, your lack of integrity."
Yeah.
It's like dude, I'm the most transparent fucking person there is. So like
Right.
I don't want other people that don't know who I am yet to go, "Oh, he's part of the group of people in the secret chat or whatever." It's like, "No, at least I want to explain that like, dude, what if you just take the time to learn, right? The conversation we had today, right here on the podcast about, oh, do you play Samuel over Westbrook over this guy over that? Like, he's like, well, how do all the players have the same? I mean, people are responding back to him. It's like, dude, I don't even talk to these people, and I had the same lineup as Adam, or I didn't talk, and I have 5 of the 7 guys. It's like, and dude, I even looked at his lineup, and his lineup wasn't that. I mean, I expected. That's how low respect. I expected
Yeah.
worse. I mean, Cousins and Robbie Anderson. Yeah, no, that
Yeah.
wasn't in part of that player pool that you should have had. But I was expecting. So I was like
I know.
oh, let me find this. I don't even know what his username was until Adam posted it.
It wasn't that
So I
far
wanted
off.
to
Yeah.
see. I
It
wanted. To,
wasn't bad.
I really. I was the most excited. I was like, I need to see. I want to see this lineup. I want to see like some fucked up thing. I want to see fucking Juju Smith-Schuster plus fucking Tim Patrick and fucking you paid up for a Jonathan Taylor. I want to see some really fucked up. And then it's like, oh, it's kind of you got 7 guys that should be in there, and like 2 you really like dude, as if you just went down and played like Heineke plus Woods, like you would have been fine, right?
Yep.
I mean, like
Yep.
I would have looked at that lineup and go, not my choice necessarily, right? But
Yeah.
viable cash lineup. You still would have lost the head to head, but whatever. But that's kind of what we're talking about, right?
Hmm. That's exactly what we're talking about.
So Spike Week, NBA's back in what 15 days?
Yeah, it's coming up close. I'm actually really excited. The NBA stuff for best ball has actually been a lot of fun. I always love NBA DFS. I think it's like the hard, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, as the season gets going and all that. NBA DFS is probably the hardest, maybe the thinnest edges or whatever, but it's still like one of the most fun for me. I love the strategy around it, and I like basketball. So diving into the best ball side of things, it's actually been really fun because, I mean, NFL best ball is like definitely like unconquered, but like there's at least like a lot of smart people like trying to figure out the best strategies and all that kind of stuff. NBA is like, I mean, I don't have a clue either, but like I'm trying to figure it out, and I feel like I'm applying some of like a lot of the things that you and I talk about strategy wise and stuff to NBA, and it's totally wide open for anybody to figure out. I talked about best ball early when I hopped back on this show, and it's like, you want to talk about DFS like circa 5 or 6 years ago. Like that's like these like niche, ancillary sports. NBA is not niche, but in the best ball space, it's very, very much smaller and newer. So it's been a lot of fun to dive into. And so if you're interested in that or any in-season NFL stuff, which is crazy. It's nuts. This best ball stuff is absolutely nuts. Every week they launch new contests on DraftKings. Underdog has new in-season best ball contests. There's playoff stuff coming. So spikeweek.com, that's my plug. Head on over, hop in the Discord, and join us if you're interested in that.
And on October 18th, that's when I'll figure out who's on what team. Right, in the NBA, right? Like that. I don't even know. Like that's why it's like I don't. Like I'm assuming. I mean, a lot of the people are still on their same teams, but typically when I open the first 2-game slate that night or whatever the opening night, I'll open up RotoGrinders projections and go, oh, that guy's on that team now. Oh, okay.
Russell Westbrook is on the Lakers. That's the big. There's your big one. Now you're spoiled. You're gonna learn something between now and then. That's the big. That's the big doozy. The real big doozy
is Ben Simmons going to play for anyone?
Ben Simmons is not looking like he's going to be playing for anybody, and some of the guys refused to get the old shot. And
Wiggins didn't Wiggins just?
Wiggins just got it. Yeah, Wiggins just got it. And but Kyrie, I'm not so sure Kyrie is ever going to do that. So
Kyrie Irving believes the world is flat.
Yeah, I mean,
come on. He is like that. Like if you're not past the point that the world is round, you're probably not to the point that the vaccines are effective.
Yeah, that is true. So yeah, that's been what I've been diving into who's getting vaccinated and how does that impact their schedules and all that kind of stuff. That's been exactly what I want to be spending my time doing. But shout out to Kyrie and Wiggins and all these idiots for doing that.
Okay, you could always find me at Blender HD on Twitter and pick up The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass. You could find it at theoryofdfs.com.